Welcome everyone to Unmasked Post-COVID-19 Communication Trends as we launch the first qualitative study of its kind. So we would love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from. It'll be great to see who's with us this evening. And since we'll be talking about digital communications, we encourage you to use the hashtag Trends Unmasked, all one word, in your social media posts. Now, the report itself is now live. You can see it in this event's Expo section. If you're familiar with HOPIN, or if you're not yet, it'll be a good opportunity to get familiar. So make sure to open this in another one of your tabs so you don't leave the conversation here. But the Expo is it should be on your left-hand side from this stage, if I've got that right. Few words about our agenda today. So in a few moments, we've got a super panel of association leaders and communications experts, who will share their experiences and insights on this evening's topic. We will invite all of you to ask questions or to comment in the chat throughout the conversation, so don't wait. To make it more interactive, we'd love to invite some of you actually onto stage to ask your question yourself orally. So make sure you keep an eye out. If you post a question, we may say, get ready to go live on stage. In the end, we'll have a one-to-one networking session. So that'll be at 7 o'clock. So please make sure to stick around and meet the other attendees after our panel discussion. But before we go to the panel, I want to invite our host, the founder and CEO of Savion Ray, Bisera Savoska, to introduce the report. So Bisera, the floor is yours.
So happy to see already a lot of familiar faces and names in the chat. So thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. I want to start by explaining a bit why we created this report in the first place. So a few months ago, we started to I have spoken to a lot of people that were wondering what is the future for associations in terms of communication. So how to actually make their strategic decisions in the next year. A lot of questions such as what kind of event should I host, or is this change permanent? Is it temporary? Were on people's minds. And that brought a lot of uncertainty. So there was a pressing need for answers, for insights, benchmarks. Everyone wanted to know where they stand in comparison to others. So it turned out that nobody really knows all the answers. And some of those decisions we need to make as a community, right? Everyone together. And to address this, we created the study, and we thought, we considered a lot what the approach should be. We considered surveys or data analysis, and in the end we decided no, the most important aspect is the conversations with people. So our approach became in-depth interviews with association leaders and the communication experts. And to be more precise, we talked to over 20 of these representatives, and we came across 5 clear trends that we included in the report, and these were cross-cutting, cross industries, topics, and so on. What amazed me the most is how eager people were to exchange these experiences and to talk about what they've learned and to listen to others, really. Everybody almost told me that I can't wait to read what others have said. And this is what I hope this report will achieve, to become a stepping stone in learning what changes the pandemic brought, and to create a space in order to form a stronger community of EU communicators. And if you share this opinion, please reach out. I'd love to find out together with you how and what is the best way to nourish this community and to contribute in bringing people together, because after 2 years of COVID-19, this, I believe, is well needed. At Savion Ray, and as my personal conviction, we genuinely believe that today's communication shapes tomorrow's policy choices. And I see this report as our small contribution to better policymaking. I'd like to say a big thank you to the Savion Ray team, who's put their hearts and souls into this report and to today's event. Our copywriter, Simona, who was holding the pen on the report, our creative director, Oriana, who created the cover page, the visuals inside, and the layout on the event site, our account director, Ana Maria, who's coordinated every aspect of this launch, our account executive, Steli, who made this event happen and executed everything to perfection, our senior account executive, Daniel, who made the campaign happen, and of course, Rick for the editorial advice and overall support. But maybe most importantly, I would like to thank the experts who talked to us and made this report possible and shared the valuable insights that inform the text. I would like to mention all of them, so please bear with me. The list is long, but each and every person on the list deserves to get a mention. I'll start with Sylvie Atkin from Plastics Europe, who is also joining us in the panel. Malgosha Bartoshik from Wind Europe, also part of the panel today. Birgit Begger from the European Heart Network. Veronica Bander from MSD. Andrea Boccuni from BASF. Jean-Baptiste Boucher from Copa Cogeca. Jenny Bjorklov, LinkedIn trainer and coach. Yorgo Shatsimakakis from Hydrogen Europe. Yorgo was supposed to join us today. Unfortunately, he had personal engagements that prevented him from doing so. Bruce Douglas from Euroelectric. I saw that he's in the audience today. Annika Gat-Sorrenti from CropLife Europe. Orania Georgitsaku from Lighting Europe. Will Henley from the International Hydropower Association. Philip Hurd from Huawei, again, a company that was in the midst of the fake news avalanche. Pia Lina Launch from European Aluminium. Jarek Perrone from MedTech Europe. Andy Powery-Smith from FPIA, again, an association that was very affected by the pandemic, representing the pharmaceutical industry. Ines Rubello from UNESDA Soft Drinks Europe. Chris Ruff from Digital Europe. Chris is also joining us today in the panel. William Sermon from Food Drink Europe. Will is also here with us today in the panel. Jurate Spakaite from the Association of European Self-Medication. And last but not least, Shireen Wheeler from the European Investment Bank. Thank you all. You made this happen, and without you, there would be no Trends Unmasked. With that, I'll give the floor to our panel, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
To unmask the 5 trends that were identified in this study. And I'm going to run through them just really fast what they are, and then we'll talk more about each one of them in sequence. So the 5, for those of you counting at home, number 1 was omnipresent digital. Second of which is called hybrid-ish events. Third of which is walk the green talk. The 4th is hello thought leaders. And our 5th trend is rethinking purpose. So now I'm eager to have a really interactive discussion about these 5 trends, including comments and questions from those of you joining us around Brussels and Europe. I can already see we've got some association leaders. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves and communication experts out there. So some of you contributed to this study, and I know Bisera has thanked those of you who did. Really look forward to you adding your voices here this evening as well. Feel free to do so. When you do, again, use that chat function. And if you're feeling brave, hopefully we can get you to join us on stage to ask your questions orally. But in either case, do provide your name and your professional affiliation so we know the sources of the questions and comments. So to get us started with their reactions are 5 leaders who are among the 20-some who contributed their experiences and insights. and which serve as the backbone to this report. And they are, I think you have heard all of their names so far, but I want to just say them again and introduce them as they join me here on stage. So Małgosia Bartuszczyk, Deputy CEO at Wind Europe. Sylvie Aitken, there you go. Welcome, Małgosia. Sylvie Aitken, Communications Director at Plastics Europe.
Hello.
Will Sermon, Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Food Drink Europe. And Chris Ruff, Director for Communications and Political Outreach at Digital Europe. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So when we talk about our first trend, which was called Omnipresent Digital, and you're either a digital believer or a convert, or you're already falling behind and missing out. Now, who better to talk about this trend than the person responsible for communications at Digital Europe? Now, Chris, based on our conversation, I know that as the world was turning upside down in spring of 2020, you said that you felt the pressure for your organization to instantly, almost overnight, be the experts on how everybody was going to live their new digital lives. And so I'm interested if you can tell us a little bit about how did you feel that people were actually looking to you to sort of preach from atop Mount Digitalis or something and convert the masses to a new dogma, or tell us a little bit about that moment taking us back to sort of early 2020.
Hi, Rick. Thanks a lot for having me, and to you, Bisera, as well, everyone at Savvy on Ray. Yeah, well, I felt the pressure. I told you that because, and I think before I get on to that, I will just say, for me, this omnipresent digital trend, I see it in two ways, right? We have the trend towards digital tools, the fact that none of us could meet in person, the shift towards a more online life, spending much more of their time online and having to adapt to deal with that. And then the growth of digital as a policy area, which obviously affected me and Digital Europe a huge amount. And when I think about, the way that we had to shift online, that's where I felt the pressure. Digital Europe has to be good at digital communications, right? So this is the expectation I felt out there. And in reality, we're like many associations out there, we're an SME. We are mainly staffed by political science graduates, and we don't have the budgets of other huge associations, but we do represent many of the companies that everybody is using on a daily basis, right? So this is what I meant when I felt that pressure. Now, when I think about social media, which is one of the things that came up in the report, I think that, in my view, it's never going to replace the face-to-face public affairs work that we do, but it is a shop front. And if you don't have a good shop front, no one's going to come into your shop and talk to you about what you're selling. So this is the way I saw it. And I know that maybe others will disagree that you can convince someone online on Twitter. I just disagree with that. And I think that if you don't have a good shop front, then no one's going to come and listen to what you're talking about. The other mini trend I thought that we saw was this almost a democratization and an increase in accessibility with a lot of the people that we wanted to speak to. Now I'm speaking to you here from my home office, also happens to be my son's bedroom, as you can see up there. I think, and this is perfectly fine these days. And we had a window into other people's lives. Everyone was muddling through at the same time. And an opportunity that came up is that we were able to speak to many more people that we've ever spoken to before. It could be here, it could be on the other side of the Atlantic. An example was recently we had around the Trade and Technology Council with the US. We had a series of outreach meetings with Congress people from the US Senate last week. And that was made possible because of the pandemic and digital technologies, to be honest. So in that sense, we've managed to reach a lot more people. We've had many, many more meetings. You can cram, as we've all found out to our detriment, you can cram many more online meetings into a day than you can physical meetings. And just trailing one of the trends that will come up in a moment on events, we went from a physical event, not live streamed. I know it's hard to believe now in 2020, an unlive streamed physical event.
Seems like the Middle Ages, right?
I know. With 400 people in 2020, February 2020, so just before everything shut down, to 1 year, fast forward 1 year later, we have 2,000 people. And whilst we had two keynote speakers, and everyone knows how difficult it is to get keynote speakers. Fast forward a year later, we have 7, because people are that much more accessible and people are able to join us. So, and just on digital as a policy area, I don't want to take too much time here, but I'd be interested to hear from other colleagues how they felt that the policy load has increased. But when it comes to digital, whereas before it was a niche policy area, a few nerds in the corner discussing 5G rollout, digital is now everywhere in people's lives. And I think this is a godsend to communicators, because everybody, whereas before it was an abstract notion of the digitalization of society, everybody knows what that means now because they've lived through it. So this is something for us as communicators, which is great. We can communicate to people directly about their own experiences. But at the same time, we could write a press release about almost anything that the Commission does right now, because digital is in everything. And that's the
Chris,
challenge too. Yeah.
Thank you. That gives us a great start. And one thing I've got to be conscious of to make sure we get to all the trends, and we also have a chance for others to get in the conversation. I want to make sure we keep moving. But just before we go to the second trend, I just want to give the other panelists, does anybody have anything you want to react to? Chris called it digital and all the transformation we've been through, the tools a godsend. Does anybody agree or disagree? You want to just let me know? Sylvie, is that a hand up?
Yeah, no, there's a hand up. I agree. No, I agree.
Agree.
And Margosha agrees. Okay, so it's a positive thing. I mean, I'm seeing thumbs up. If anybody no thumbs down on what has happened with digital omnipresence, it's all thumbs up. Yeah. You can jump in. Don't worry if you want to jump in. We'll sort out any overlapping voices. Okay. I want to move on. We're gonna, I'm sure, be talking digital throughout the conversation. And I really liked Chris's story about the moving from an online-only event to, an offline-only event to an online-only event. And I know the next chapter of your story, which we'll come to in a few minutes. But maybe we're going to move to the second trend. And the second trend, which has been identified as this hybrid-ish events. Should I do a hybrid event? Now, the answer to that question will depend on your communication goals. And I want to turn first to Will to hear about how you've done things there. I know you did a great, refreshingly original event, which was offline in the physical world. Maybe do you want to tell us about that, Will?
Yeah, sure. I can hear the Hoover for a cleaner in the next door room. Hopefully he won't come in here and start hoovering me up any second. Oh no, thanks, Rick. Well, and I will comment on what Chris said just very briefly, because I think what we found, that omnipresence on digital, it's made us all more efficient and more effective because we've had focus on digital. We've had no choice. We've focused in that space. And so events that we've had online, where we've had 250 people tune in, which we've kind of all done that. You know, when we were in person, we would be hip, hip, hooray if we had 50 people in a room, and we wouldn't know what to do with 50 people. But it's with 5 times reaching a greater audience, and we're becoming more effective and efficient at managing that, which has been exciting. And also our annual event this year, we took that entirely online, and it was great. We basically treated it like a TV show. We made a half-an-hour high-spec documentary with interviews. We managed to cut out all the ums and the ahs and managed to get the keynote speakers to be absolutely on time because we filmed it and played it out as live, but it was all pre-record, and it worked really well. And it was half an hour, and you came in, you watched it, part of the annual event, and then people left. So we've learned to be more effective, I think, in the way that we do things. Now, you referred specifically to something that we've done at Food Drink Europe, which is we got a food van and drove it into the middle of Brussels and used that as a platform to speak to our stakeholders. Now, let me take a step back. So we like everybody, let's use MEPs as a good example. I think there was a curve with MEPs that we saw initially when COVID hit. We could speak to MEPs, and there was some excitement there of the opportunities. You can hear the Hoover in the background over there. Off he goes. There was the excitement, and we did start to speak to MEPs and have that interaction. It was great. And there was the curiosity, but we quickly, I felt, got to the top of the curve and then dropped off reasonably rapidly, where we were putting in calls to MEPs and the phones were ringing out, and they didn't want to speak to us, or were using it as quite a good excuse to not engage, which was really frustrating. And we found it difficult. And we had a lot of soul searching about how to reach not just MEPs, but other core audiences. And so I think one thing with great disruptions, it's a mother of invention and innovation as well. And so what COVID kind of gave us that license to think outside the box. And we thought, well, how do we convene people if not online? What's something else we can do that's COVID friendly? And it was a food van that we drove to Place Jean. For those of you that know Brussels, it was Place Jean Rey, which is right in between the European Parliament and the European Council. So strategically, it was a nice place. And it was literally a place where we invited commission officials, perm reps, MEPs. We had about 100 meetings down there over the course of 2 weeks, where we engaged and built the sorts of relationships that we couldn't do over online platform. We could only get so far online. And I think that there's an intrinsic humanity or human desire to be face to face when you build those trusted relationships. And it was interesting that we invited 11 MEPs to speak on the phone, which you would think would be really easy, and none of them picked up. We invited 11 MEPs to get out of their office, walk down the stairs, bring their office with them, come out in the rain or the wind, come down to the food van and have a meeting. And they all did it because it was weird, different, a change, outdoors, whatever it was, it worked. And so as an engagement tool, it was great. And so while the idea was, I guess, born out of COVID, it's something that we all take forwards, and it's a learning that we'll take from COVID. Like, how do we add value and do something that's a bit different that MEPs think, oh yeah, okay, I'll give that a go.
I like that sort of A/B testing you were doing there, like calling them and inviting them down to the food truck, and which one was more effective. No, it's really interesting. And it actually, let me just ask you one follow-up on that. Is in terms of the food truck, this food van, was there an online dimension to that? Did you do anything there?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think communications never exists in isolation of online or in person, or I don't think it should in any case. I think they complement each other really well. So there was heaps of online. We had about 4,000 direct engagements because we were promoting the van, we were promoting the conversations we were having down at the van, and then all the meetings we had were then, we were including the MEPs in our Twitter conversation and LinkedIn and things like that afterwards. Okay, and so the wraparound to the in-person was entirely digital, and that was really important because it got us to that broader, larger audience. So it was complementary, and you couldn't have done one without the other.
Fantastic. So there is a hybrid dimension to something that in the past would have been perhaps almost entirely offline. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. And before we move off of this one, I just want to see if, in terms of events, Malgosia, I'm actually really curious because I know you've got a big event coming up. So just as you were planning that and thinking about it, how much are you thinking online, offline, hybrid?
That's a very good question. So, look, we actually had an event already last week, which was 750 people, all in person in Amsterdam, and we were not sure how many people we are going to get till the very end. You know that the rules are still actually not very stable, so we could only promote it a month before because that was the time when we got a green light from the Dutch government, and at the end we had to close the registrations because we had many more people that wanted to join that we could actually have at the event. We did some because we were so late with announcing it, and because we were so late actually knowing what we are doing. Just as a plan B, we decided on some content online, but we were really hoping and focusing on having in-person event. And I think that's a trick, really. How do you balance it? How do you make sure actually that what you do online is not competing with what you do on site? And that should be, I think, one of the big learning from the COVID time and using all those different online digital tools. What is good about it that we want to carry on doing, and how do we combine it with the physical presence and the physical events? And it's true, we have another event coming at the end of the year, which is much bigger than the ones that I've mentioned. It's a conference and exhibition. Normally has around 12,000 people in Copenhagen this year, and we are preparing for a fully in-person event with a very small online content in terms of streaming or just recording.
And just because we said that the whether people go online, offline, or hybrid depends on their communications goals. So in that big event where you're gathering thousands of people physically with a relatively much smaller online dimension, what would you describe just really quick as your main goal with that? Is it relationship building?
It's yes, it's learning, it's relationship building, it's matchmaking, it's business. And what we realize is that I think one key point is that with hybrid events is that actually you should probably think about two different audiences. So you have an audience for your online content, and you have audience for your content that you are serving at the venue in a physical way. So and the reason why I'm saying that is that I think when you get people to the event, they are just too busy to sit and watch the content that you'll be streaming live. Yeah, so you shouldn't really count on that. And then if you try to give it to them after the event, it's like passé. They've seen it, they've been at the event, so I think it's very difficult to get them back to the to the event that they actually participated to. So it's important to look at it with two different audiences. Okay, who cannot come and who do I want to serve with? Who do I want to communicate with? Using the digital tools, and who is going to be on site, and how do I make sure that they make the most out of it?
Great. Okay, so it's two things at the same time, bit of a juggling act, but it can be done. All right, let's move to the third trend, which is walk the green talk. And this one is really about making sure you act as much as you communicate, and that you recognize those who are the quiet doers. So there's a lot of risk of greenwashing, as we all know. It's now finally fashionable to be green. And a lot of folks are doing it a bit, they're doing it in a variety of ways and in a variety of motives. And it's really important to be authentic. And I want to maybe just bring in, I think, Sylvie, you had said perhaps you had some thoughts on the subject coming from the perspective of Plastics Europe, maybe.
Well, I think, yes. So thank you, Rick. Walking the green talk is basically fundamental to our organization and our industry. I don't think I need to say how, reputationally speaking, we have many, many challenges. It's what makes also this job very exciting, because it's issues rich. But when it comes to looking at how we carve out a new strategy, and the organization has been going through a lot of change over the last couple of years, and kind of seeing how it can reevaluate its purpose, be more aligned with what's happening in the outside world. And I think that's kind of critical when you're looking at how you communicate externally, is to always bring in that external lens and acid test it against what it is that you're trying to communicate, what you're trying to evoke. What I find, having spent years in consultancy, there's a typical behavior to very much see this through a one framed lens, which is generally industry based, and not integrating that external lens. And as the walking the green talk implies, it's about showing the action. And I think for a long time, an industry like plastics, for the good and the bad, has struggled in trying to really push that agenda forward. And I think, going back to Malgosia's point earlier, there are a lot of exciting things that members are doing, and it was Bizarro, sorry, exciting innovations that members are doing, that companies are involved in, and it's about being able to bring those to life and to actually better showcase what the industry is doing to do that. And it's really only that way that we will build that credibility to be able to be walking that green talk, in my view.
Yeah, great. Is that, I guess, my question for you, Sylvie, still is, in terms of walking this as much as you would want to be walking it, talking it as much as, from the communication side, do you feel you've got the stories to tell? What is the challenge for you?
So we're building those stories. There's a lot that's been happening behind the scenes. I came into this role just over a year ago, under COVID, under lockdown. So there were, its own challenges in joining, moving from consultancy to in-house as well is a very different viewpoint. And it was quite fundamental for me to kind of assess, well, what is it that we've got to say? And it's still what I acid test my members against as well. And I still stand there and say, for as long as I'm a conflicted middle, it means we haven't quite got it yet. And that's, it's about bringing that honest, open, more authentic perspective that we try and ensure that we push through our communications strategy, the narrative we put out there. But like you say, it's about being able to build that with clear stories and clear actions that we can demonstrate. And there's, our members are becoming more open to wanting to share those. They understand the value in doing that. It's as much about the what as it's about the who as well, and how we engage, I think, a broader value chain in that narrative as well. We're just only one cog in that process, and it's fundamental to the narrative we have on circularity to ensure that we really bring, the other voices to the table to be able to, substantiate those actions as well. But it's also about ensuring that, we've got the right people to do it, and telling those stories, I think, through different lenses as well, that it's not just only, through ours, but that they're, the way that we're able to deliver on the, the commitments that we might make or the ambitions that we have can be done with the amount of content that we've got available. But this is also something that we're working through, and there's more to come. There's a lot that's been invested this year from the industry's perspective, and we're going to be in a very different position coming into 2022 to talk about what that really means when we say walking the green talk and showing that authenticity.
Okay, great, thanks. Will, did you want to comment on this? Yeah.
I will. I think it's a really important one. COVID-19 and conversations amongst our members, it was interesting because there was lots of conversations about what's our focus as an industry now. Is it COVID-19 recovery, or is it delivering on green ambition? There was an or in there. And that was kind of difficult, I think, because we had to step back a little bit and say, hang on a minute, the climate issues and the biodiversity issues and all the other green issues haven't gone away. In fact, there's even a greater spotlight on them potentially than pre-COVID. And so there's been quite an interesting transition in the COVID recovery to the green COVID recovery. And I think that's been really important. But one point I'll pick up on, I think that the walking the talk is really important. And we say it a lot, and we kind of put the emphasis on our membership as associations often. I think there has to be more responsibility and leadership at the organizational level, at our association level. And like, how are we, albeit small impact, but how are we operating as an organization in terms of, are we carbon neutral? How do we source our food for our meetings? What's the policy for getting all our members flying in from around the world every time that we have a meeting? How often do we meet? What's the culture like? What are our values within the organization? I think there is a real opportunity for self-reflection as an organization, and how do we operate as an organization? Now, people will say, well, that's a drop in the ocean, but I think it shows real leadership as an organization. Absolutely. And I think that will go out and create ripples towards the membership as well, and also the way we interact with our stakeholders, whether it's the commission or the council or the perm reps, wherever it might be.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I want to keep us moving to the fourth trend. So the fourth trend is called Goodbye Influencers, Hello Thought Leaders. And the premise here is that influencers are increasingly irrelevant. Now we'll talk about maybe what are influencers, but that thought leaders are really the voices of the community, and those are getting more and more attention for lots of good reasons. And I know, Sylvia, I want to come back to you here because I know in the report, you're quoted as saying that it's fundamental for spokespeople to be more human, more authentic, genuine in their narrative, and that you're trying to make your managing director's online profile more approachable and open. So tell us, why is that fundamental, and why now more than ever?
Well, I think that thought leadership has been around for a long time, and it's a buzzword and a trend that we as comms like to use a lot. But in my view, it's probably overused and actually probably misused as well. When I look to break it down to its bare essentials, there are two key components: thought and leadership. And although it sounds obvious, but you might be surprised at how many people or organizations just focus on the thought and a lot less on the leadership. And for me, it means taking charge of a conversation, indicating the direction or offering insights into that. So the thought, but it's also it's also about when it comes to the semblance of that follow through and what that looks like and giving direction, and that's really the leadership aspect. But when you think about thought leaders or the new trend around that. Generally speaking, it can be a person, but it can also be an organization. It can be a community. It doesn't have to necessarily be an individual, but that leads on an idea or a purpose or a vision, typically based on, from my experience, on experience, knowledge, and expertise. But I think recent history can show us as well, and I think this is where it becomes important in this day and age, and especially in this kind of post-ish COVID world. Those key three criteria aren't necessarily a prerequisite for thought leadership. I think Donald Trump and Greta Thunberg are a perfect example of this. And whether you like them or not, they have very different profiles, they have very different agendas, but what is it that they have in common is that they know how to bring people along with them. And for me, that's kind of fundamental to the success of your thought leadership. So I think when organizations are looking to put a thought leadership strategy in place, and everybody does it and everyone's talking about it, it's really about what is it that you can put in there in the most authentic way possible that actually is going to get people to follow you. So it's not just about believing you, but then actually take on, the mantle and be your, the extension of your spokespeople and your ecosystem. So I think that in that respect, that's where COVID has pushed many of us to reassess what matters and what we value and where we want or should place our energies. And the way we see the world, I believe, has really shifted. I'd say also that we are probably even more impatient and driven by the need for positive systemic change in the world around us, and whether that be for our planet, for our families, for our health, for our ecosystems, for our neighbors, but really for the next generation as well. And so what we're looking for, and I certainly believe this in an industry that I'm working in, which has been known to be very closed, very unrevealing, very intransparent, that what is playing a big part in our change, in our shift, and related to that thought leadership is looking for more connections and more human interaction, and someone that you can follow, actually. There's the whole point of that leadership in there. And I believe that businesses and organizations like mine have an opportunity to rethink what thought leadership actually means when you break it down to that essence. And so, we're lucky we've got an incredibly young, dynamic, working mum as our managing director, who also started just as lockdown had happened, who comes with a very kind of centered sense of, I don't want to go out there if I can't be honest. I don't want to go out there and be peddling, what people are expecting to hear from us or what they've always heard from us, but just repackaged in a different way. And I think that that's where thought leadership in today's age, especially when you're looking at online and the influence that has and the reach that has, that the authenticity of that thought leadership has to be anchored to real change. That goes back to even our point earlier about, showing the action and being able to be those voices to do that. But what we've also done in supporting our strategy around her and building this external profile around her is to bring a more human voice to the industry as well. So we're in the process of developing and implementing a very different perspective in terms of that narrative. It's about people at the coalface. It's about people who are working in the industries every day. It's about them coming out with their stories and their truths about what they feel needs to change, why it needs to change, and what the industry is doing to do that. So it's a collective thought leadership process that we're looking to put in place. But that authenticity is essential.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sylvie. No, that's and I'm hoping we're going to be able to talk a little bit more about thought leadership. I want to, with time moving, I want to give to our fifth and final trend, which is rethinking purpose, thinking or rethinking purpose. And to accomplish a goal bigger than ourselves, we really need to take care of every individual. And I really enjoyed in the report, Malgosia, there was a little sort of almost like a little anecdotes from you and how you were doing this internally to make sure that you were keeping your team motivated, especially those with responsibilities that were drastically affected by the pandemic, such as people working reception or booking travel. So it's tempting to say that sounds like maybe an HR issue. Why is it important for external communications to also address those things on the internal individual basis?
It's about integrity at the end, I mean, purpose is very important. At the end, this is what gives us a reason to wake up and get out of bed and come to work. Yeah, and we cannot pretend that we are making that we are treating this crisis as an opportunity and we are doing excellent communication externally if people internally are not taken care of, they are not happy, they've lost their purpose. And so for us, it was really important that on one hand, of course, we focus on adapting the communication externally, but at the end, the communication is done also by the people that are working with us, right? By your team. And if we talk about the integrity, it will just, and Sylvie touched on that, it will just show that that is not credible and it's not coming naturally. So what we did in Europe, indeed, we looked at we tried to have this very personalized approach to our external communication, but it flows from a personal and individual approach that we had to our employees. And it's not only about some people, having jobs that lost a bit of purpose due to the task that they had, that suddenly from one day to another, they didn't have to welcome and greet anyone at the reception. They didn't have to, book travels and hotels for colleagues. So they had some time on hand, but they were worried. They were worried that they are not needed anymore. That they maybe their job is at risk. And by having we always had that approach in the association that any crisis is a good opportunity. You just need to have the open mind, creative mindset, and really involve people to express how they feel about it, what are their worries, and what are their ideas to make the most out of it. And indeed, as a outcome of it, we had our receptionist. She came up with this great idea to put together a newsletter for all our colleagues and gather all the information, what could be, what is still possible to do in Brussels, where people could meet and go for a walk and have nice, maybe meeting over breakfast. And she was coming up with all those different healthy tips to, on one hand, to keep that feeling that we are one team. On the other, really to, especially with many new people that started working in the association just before COVID, to know, what they can do in Brussels, being really new to the city. Yeah. We had then we had a couple other people that they simply got new tasks that we never had time to do. Educational program. We never had time to think to do it, to think about it. Yes, but to actually do it. So one of our colleagues that had more assistant tasks, and she suddenly had more time because of not doing travel booking. She did excellent program for children. She was engaged in some activities in the school of her daughter, and she introduced wind energy as part of the curriculum last year in the school, and now we are doing it in many other schools in Belgium and other capitals, European capitals, and it's up and running. That's what great. I would like to highlight here, if I may, its purpose is very important, but it will not drive people if they don't see impact, of what they do. And I think especially in digital world, with digital communication, on one hand, we have this whole spectrum of different tools that we can really measure. Is it effective what I'm doing? Is it really, am I really reaching my goals? But so rarely we actually do it. We're so happy that we had 10 webinars and that we had 200 people, but very rarely we take that next step to think, are they the right people? Are they engaged? Have they learned? Have we, are they doing what we wanted them to do by just connecting and being with us on the connected virtually. So Absolutely. The impact is extremely important, and how we measure it.
Great point. I saw heads nodding there as you were talking. I want to bring in others into the discussion now. We have about 15 minutes before we're going to close the discussion. And I think if Wouter Laux, would he be willing? I see he's posted some good comments there. Maybe he can speak to us. Is Wouter available? And others among you, please let us know that you've got things to share, insights. Put them in the chat box so we know that you're there, and we may also be able to invite you up on stage. Is Wouter able to join us on stage? It'd be great to have him. Let me just see here. And then once, so once we get him on, actually, I see I've got Chris wants to come in on a subject that, so while we wait for Walter, Chris, you want to react on the influencer point versus thought leadership? Please go ahead.
If that's okay, and I don't want to get in Walter's way here, but
go ahead.
Yeah, because the report makes a very bold claim that influencers are irrelevant. And I want to challenge that a little bit now. And I want to use an example that I saw this week, or I can't remember. I think it was on Monday. You know, the EU announced its partnership with UEFA. There was a video, quite a nice video. Finally, the EU, and I've worked in the Commission communications. Finally, they take a do something innovative. They include a football or something that might reach people. But the reaction of the Brussels bubble was instant dismissal. This is ridiculous. Spend too much money. Why are you doing this? The message is too simplistic. Not enough content, etc. Like this is the influencer bubble that operates primarily on Twitter, I would say. And this is, I think, a barrier which stops many people who are not as trained in communications as we are to get out there and actually be those thought leaders on social media, right? And this is something I noticed. So I think these influencers do matter because they're the journalists that are the politicians who are our main stakeholders. They're the people that they read. So I think they do still matter. But what the thought leadership and you know, the definition that I have, I don't think is quite as nuanced as Sylvie's, but the thought leadership that we see in terms of promoting a positive message from our staff with the human aspect covered, that kind of thing I think has grown during the pandemic. I think our staff has become more emboldened to do so. Maybe not so much on Twitter, maybe it's more on LinkedIn, but we've seen a huge increase of engagement with our wider membership, for example. We have 150 members. Some of them were meeting for the first time and engaging with us on social media. And we have people attending our events from 80 countries across the world. I mean, this kind of engagement, I mean, we're speaking to people outside of our traditional target audience, right? And I think that's cool. I mean, it's difficult when it's small association to manage, you know, when you're speaking to a wider audience, but it does amplify our message and improve our general communication.
No, it's a great point, and we may get to still talk more about measuring impact, sort of back to Małgosia's point and how you were just saying. But I want to bring Walter up on stage now. I think we've got him. So Walter, thanks so much for joining us. And please let us know you've got some reactions to what was the discussion so far.
Yes, I hear you in echo.
Okay, hopefully you get it at least once. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Indeed, well, first of all, oh no, I see. I need to exit. Well, let me quickly go out of this stage. Is this better now? No echo in this one. So no, indeed, I found it a fantastic discussion, and I'm very thrilled. I also know Will very good and have been following him from the start. He's a fantastic guy who has turned the communication of Food Drink Europe. And I was just reacting on the hybrid aspect and also the concept of having virtual meetings, because what we have
Walter,
seen...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just, I don't know if you identified your affiliation.
Yeah, maybe that's correct. I should have done this. I did it in the chat box. My name is Walter Locks. I'm the Secretary General of the European Fruit Juices Association.
Great, thanks.
And just relating to this virtual event, we had normally a in-person event, always 600 people. And 2 weeks ago, we did a TV studio event, and we only had 230 people, which made, on one side, the fatigue, but I think it's also what Małgosia said. There are two different audiences. One is coming for the content, and one is coming from the networking. And the networking you can't do through a virtual world. That is became clear to me that you always have a sort of a two-step in your conferences, where you on one side have networking opportunities in person, and one on content which you can do on a virtual world.
Great. Okay. Is there someone who wants to react to Walter's remark there? Just show me a hand if you do. I want to call on you like that. Or Walter, is there somebody you wanted to specifically address it to?
No, well, maybe as an address, what I also found the last comments on the measurement is one of the most important comments that were made indeed, because we do a lot of webinars and they are everywhere. But are we addressing the right stakeholders? Is this the right audience? And I think there, if someone can give me some good tools how to assure that we get to the right stakeholders and the right audience, and how we can measure that one and the real impact, whether indeed the audience is having the takeaways of what we want to say. That I'm really interested to get some tools on that one.
All right. Digital Europe has raised his hand on the tools. So Chris, you want to?
I just spoke, but I think what Walter was saying about the two different audiences at a hybrid event, the people that just come to mingle, and certainly our members are looking forward to doing that again as well. But maybe if you look at the virtual events as well, this is a different audience from when you're having a one-to-one meeting with a policymaker. Maybe it's you have such a wide audience, but that can only build your influence when you're trying to get a meeting with the one person you actually do want to target. That's what I mean. So, and I think we've seen that many more people came, many more people who weren't our traditional target group, but that has aided us to get to meet the people that we want to meet.
Great. Walter, thanks so much. Really appreciate you joining the discussion.
Yeah,
I'm going to bring in another participant here. And so I think Peter Jan Herman, I see you've been active in the chat, and we'd love to get you to share some of your thoughts orally on stage. So I think there's a link that you're being sent, and if you can click through the link, we can bring you up on stage and hear from you. And we got Peter Jan. And in the meantime, while we wait, is there further reactions that people wanted to share on any of these things? I like especially this measurements question. I can imagine all of you on our panel going to your boards, to your members, and having them all say, justify, my membership fees, justify your budgets, your requests for an increase, and they want to know how you measure it. How do you measure impact? Any responses to that?
I think first you need to know, what you want to achieve with it, and for I think many times you see that the tool becomes the objective. I want to organize a webinar. Why do you want to organize webinar? Ask yourself a question. What do I want to achieve with it? Who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to have in the audience? What do I want to make sure that listens to my messages, to interact? And then you will see that sometimes the webinar is actually not the right tool, and you actually have a meeting, one-to-one meeting with one MEP. Yeah. So I think this really the objective and knowing what you want to achieve is necessary to be able to measure whether you succeeded or not, and that's very often now forgotten. I think. Then also think about if you want to. We have now with the digital era and on all the digital tools and platforms that we have, is you have all the possibilities to reach out to audiences and invite people that normally would not travel to our event in Copenhagen, because it would take them 3 days to be there. Now they can take 1 hour from their time and join an event just to listen to. So, but then you need to reach out to them. Don't think that if you are promoting a webinar that is supposed to be targeting people that are not in your network, that they are just going to find out about it. You need to you need to make an effort to identify that audience and then reach out to them and make sure that they know about your activities.
Yeah. Before we come to closing marks, I see Will, you've got your hand up. You want to react on the measurement question?
Well, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Malgosia there. I mean, there's so much communications that's done for the sake of communications, so much money that's spent on infographics that never see the light of day, so many videos that are made that get 12 views, so much that we do that doesn't make any impact. And I think I really like the last trend around purposeful thinking. And I think in our personal lives through COVID-19, a lot of us reflected on, why are we here? What am I trying to do with my life? Where do I want to go? And I think that's really important at a personal level, but I think it's really important at an organizational level as well. Like, what is our organization actually trying to do here? And in the context of COVID-19 and the green challenges we talked about, how do we as an organization align what we do in our day-to-day with greater societal benefit? Like, how are we actually contributing beyond going through the motions that inspires our staff and the people that we work with, and helps others to see us in a different light and builds relationships for us outside as well. And I think it's all led by purpose. And I think that in my closing, something I would leave people with would be that focus, what's your purpose? And if you don't know yet, then try and find out what it is. And then everything should flow into that.
Great. Will, you've kicked off our last round here. That's perfect. Thank you very much. And actually, so what I want to do is I want to ask Sylvie, Małgosia, and Chris to all sort of answer that question. As you're thinking ahead to, and you're perhaps already in the midst of it, maybe you've even finished with your budgeting process for next year. I don't know, but okay, Sylvie's not yet, but you've got time still to the end of the year. So but presumably you're either in it or entering this process of planning and budgeting for 2022. Who knows what the world is going to look like just a few months out. But I'm interested, as you think about the 5 trends we've talked about tonight, just pick one of them, and I'm going to ask you to be really, really brief, but which trend are you thinking about differently than you did when you were going through a similar process a year ago or 2 years ago? Certainly it would have been different. So who is ready to answer that with something right now? Because I'd love to go through. Yes, Sylvie, go ahead. Thanks.
Can I pick 2 trends?
Oh, then they got to be each half as long.
Okay, no, I'll be really brief. I think just building on what Will said there, and so purpose is going to be one of my trends. And because I'm relatively new to this organization, it's been going through a transition. It's all still a little bit up in the air as to how all this kind of looks. But that's obviously clearly core to my job, is making sure that it's going to land where it needs to and it has that purpose. And I think that, when you're thinking about the purpose, what you need to constantly do is ensure that you're having an outside-in approach, that you're looking at through that lens, because otherwise your purpose could be great for your members and what they want to say and what they want to do. But if it doesn't resonate and doesn't even stick with what's happening outside, then that's going to be a problem. And in terms of your measurement, you're going to fail. Second trend is on the digital. That is a space that we're actually looking at a lot more closely. We've invested this year in doing a kind of a deeper dive into where the conversations actually happen. So what's happening below the surface, not just what you can find on the analytics and through Google, but really better understanding the conversations that are happening, and therefore how do we better get to those conversations? How do we get invited to those conversations? Where do we actually need to put our time and our focus on there? Because going back also to the point of the hybrid events, what we found already from this research is that there are some policymakers are kind of sitting outside on the periphery, and actually it means that trying to get to them through social media isn't necessarily going to be the best way to do it. It's a part of it. But one-on-one meetings are going to be far more important. So those would be my 2 trends.
Okay, and you squeezed the third one there too with the hybrid events. So, okay, so maybe if I can come to Chris and ask you, which of these trends are you thinking about a little differently than you did before?
Okay, well, does Sylvie pick 2? I'm going to pick 2. No, well, I mean, the first one, and what I'm going to rethink about after today's discussion is this link between the purpose and the external communication. I think I've learned a lot today, so that's got my mind thinking. But if I'm looking forward to the budget process now, it's all about hybrid events, because I think when we went from physical to online, it was all about how do we maintain what we had before. Mm-hmm. The 5-person panel, the one that we're doing right now. But now I'm thinking, I've had a lot of interesting conversations this week. When we move to hybrid, do we have to keep that structure, or can we do something different? Is there a hunger for something different? What is that going to cost? How are we going to do it? What kit do we need in our office? All those kind of thoughts are going through. Right? It's not about going back to 5 people and a moderator.
I think the only kit you need is a food van. That's the takeaway.
Well, yeah. But what can we sell as good as a hamburger or a hot dog? I mean, come on. So,
Małgosia, I'm going to ask you to be our final one to choose a trend. How are you thinking about it differently?
Look, I'm just going to build on what Chris said. I think it's extremely important not to settle and think, okay, I now mastered the digital trends and hybrid events, and now that's what I'm going to do it, and I know how to do it. Be attentive, keep really observing how people react to it, what is impactful, and what's not impactful, and keep adapting. And I think it's really important to adapt communication and all your activities to what is happening, how people are reacting to it. And you will see now that now we are in this hybrid trend, but people want to go back to physical events as soon as possible, So let's I think it was one of you, I think it was Chris, saying that at the beginning MEPs were so excited about getting a phone call and be on the Zoom call. By the end of last year, anyone who wanted to organize a conference, that would consist of Zoom after Zoom meeting would just not fly. People would pay you not to watch it. Yeah. So let's really adapt, observe, adapt, and do it in a timely manner so that we make the most of the opportunities that this type of crisis is offering us, rather than catching up and do things as that might not get traction and be impactful.
I love the pragmatic optimism all of you are exhibiting here. Was it Churchill who said, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste"? He said a lot of other things. So great, thank you very much. So what I want to do is wrap up our discussion, but don't go away. We've got some networking still ahead of us. So I just want to thank very much everybody. Certainly I want to thank our panelists. So Małgosia Bartosik, Deputy CEO of WIN Europe, Sylvie Aitken, Communications Director of Plastics Europe, Will Sermon, Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Food Drink Europe, and Chris Ruff, Director for Communications and Political Outreach at Digital Europe. Thank you all very much. It was fantastic hearing from you. And for those of you who are listening, you can hear more about what they had to say by looking at the report. And I really do want to thank the whole team. Bisera did it at the start. I want to do it again to close. The team at Savion Ray, who produced this study that we all are benefiting from and organized this event. So thank you very much. And maybe Bisera, I see you're on. Shall I invite people to the networking? Would you like to do so?
Either way, Rick, just to remind everyone, so for whoever can stay, there is a kind of a relay of matching people together in the networking. It should be on your right, somewhere here. Left, sorry. So basically you will be matched with one of the attendees every 6 minutes. So there is a 6 minute time deadline, whatever.
Like speed dating.
Every 6 minutes, exactly. Every 6 minutes, you will be matched with someone else. So hopefully, the more people we have, the more interesting it will be. But I am certainly looking forward to meeting some of the people that I've read are in the audience. So, and thank you for being a part of the panel, Will, Sylvie, Małgosia, Chris, and thank you for moderating, Rick.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you in the networking.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.